1, 2, 3. Jim Grant, it's the 20th episode. They said we couldn't do it. The 20th episode of The Cruise. You take the news, you put that with my name, which is Craig. That comes together to be Cruise. You add Jim Grant to it. The name doesn't change at all. But on the 10th of August, 2020, in what could be arguably the worst year of our lives, you're going to hear Mr. Jim Grant tell us what this episode entails. Here he is.
We're going to be having an eclectic mix today. Plastic in the oceans, Cleopatra's tomb in Egypt, the antibody tests being dodgy, look at the rates of normal flu and the counterproductivities of lockdown. It's all on episode 20 of The Cruise, being recorded on Monday, the 10th of August.
That's awesome.
Our first
hot day. Barbecue weather, Jim.
Oh yeah, I'm sweating like Bill Clinton is like when he first heard they found Ghislaine Maxwell's tapes. Yeah. So, and we did our first podcast with Will Franken over a year ago, and it never got to air for a variety of reasons. Yeah. I used that same joke then, only with Bill Clinton being arrested on Jeffrey Epstein, and then that's when we predicted he would be suicided, but. We never aired it, did we? We did look like geniuses, but never mind. We made up for it on the episode 17, didn't we?
It was a nice birth as well, and I hope he's doing great. I've enjoyed what he's up to on social media. He's just he's all over it. He's on it and all over it, and doing yeoman's work. It'd be nice to speak to him on this again.
Yeah, as soon as we've got our tech sorted, all that kind of stuff, let's get Will Franken on. Will Franken. So if you're a fan of this podcast, do check out the work of Will Franken as well. Will Frank.
That stand-up set that he did, a few months ago. What was it? 6 months ago. Just so current and so relevant and so funny, and his characterizations, particularly of British characters, is just phenomenal, mind-blowing. He's a touched in a great way performer, and I really admire what he does.
Yep, have a check on him out on YouTube, Will Franken. So, and we'll get him on as soon as we've got our things sorted.
Maybe we can throw a link to that.
Yeah, we could throw a link to Will.
Yeah, cool.
So, our first article here. Hey, memories, back when we were free and able to go and buy a pack of chewing gum without having to wear a mask. So this is Emma, Brazil, Wednesday the 22nd of July. This is from Metro. Yeah. So this is nearly 3 times more people dying of flu and pneumonia than coronavirus. Nearly 3 times. 3, count them. As many people are now dying of flu and pneumonia than with coronavirus in England and Wales, new figures have revealed. Numbers published by the Office for National Statistics show 917 flu and pneumonia deaths were registered for the week ending on July the 10th. In comparison, 366 people died that week after testing positive for COVID-19. And we know what that means. 366 people died that week after testing positive for COVID-19 doesn't necessarily mean they died from COVID-19. Sure. And that is conspiracy theory. You can go and see medical officers around the world describing the difference of dying from and with. You can go and listen to numerous coroner interviews, dying from and with. Not a conspiracy theory, a reality. And you decide whether it's conspiracy or not, but it is a fact that there is a difference between dying from and with. So I'll read that again. In comparison, 366 people died that week after testing positive for COVID-19, the lowest number of deaths involving the virus in the last 16 weeks, and a 31.2% decrease compared with the previous week, which saw 532 deaths. Wow. Overall, the number of deaths registered in the same week was 6.1%. That's 560 deaths, below the 5-year average. The 4th consecutive week it has been below average.
That 5-year average,
It comes as...
Get your masks on! Maybe you should wear goggles. Have you thought of gloves? It's just like, I can't even, Jim. Go ahead. I can't even. I just can't even.
If you feel a rant going on,
Hey,
I
hey,
feel your. Let it
yeah.
out. Let it out.
Let your love flow. I can't do it. I just it's all ire, and it's not it's too segmented. It's just like it's the Batman and Robin kapow kersplat. It's onomatopoeia flying into my mind, and it's not cognitive in linear fashion. We'll find something later.
A shotgun blast of reality for Mr. Campbell. I'm sure will be coming our way at some point throughout this podcast. You can feel it, can't you? Right, so it comes as 50 more coronavirus hospital deaths were confirmed in England on Tuesday, bringing the UK hospital death toll to 33,798. And again, dying from and with two different things. How many of them are from? How many of them are with? I wouldn't have a clue, but you know, with all the tests that are being dodgy as well, we don't even know how many of those tests were accurate. So this is the madness. We don't know if it's dying from or with, and if they tested with, what did they test it with? Was it one of the antibody tests that have been known to have dodginess on them and to give dodgy results, or test for the wrong type of coronavirus, the one that isn't COVID-19, or was it one of the tests that just dodgy, that tested positive for a papaya and you know, by the president of Tanzania and stuff? So not only do we not know the deaths from and with, we don't even know the ones that are with have done from tests correctly on the antibody tests, if it was the actual virus and not another form of coronavirus. And then we don't know. This is just madness. It's insanity.
Yep.
And it continues because we allow it. And I would like to point out that I do believe there is a real virus that does actually kill people with, as we've come on and mentioned on the show before. I'm not a medical doctor, but we've relayed article after article that says it seems to be linked to zinc and vitamin D deficiencies and pre-existing conditions, and of course old age. But
True. Yeah. And
you know,
obesity.
there is a real virus. It really does kill people, but it's completely, the numbers are completely inaccurate. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That has many, many articles. We've broken it down. And there'll be more on today's show. Don't you worry about that, because they come in every week. Oh, what? 100% positive again? Oh, do you know what, G? You know that test we used that we've been fearmongering with everyone? We found it has glaring errors. Oh, how much of a glaring error? Well, really big that we shouldn't, you know. So
significant.
Yes. Statistically significant errors would be the kind way of putting it. The government now has paused its official announcement of daily deaths in care homes and the wider community amid claims Public Health England has been over-exaggerating figures. Oh, they must be conspiracy theorists if they're using that terms. Why would you over-exaggerate a figure? Why would a government or a department of a government, the Public Health of England, deliberately over-exaggerate the figures to make them look bad, to make it look like they're killing their own citizens? Why would they do it? Loads of people, I wouldn't do that. No politician's going to make a mistake that makes him look worse. No politician's going to deliberately get involved in a scheme that makes him look like he's even more incompetent than he's not, unless your job is not to be the prime minister for the people, by the people, of the people, but a prime minister serving someone else's agenda. And if you do your own research, you might want to, you know. So there's an idea. So anyone that says, why would the government deliberately make themselves look bad? Well, I think the prime minister's salary, you know, imagine he's there to do a job. And I think the prime minister's salary is about 120k a year, give or take, roughly. I think it's something like that.
I bet he needs it.
Yeah, go and look at the corporate interests that he has around him. And so, all right, you know, here's a 5-year term at 120 grand a year for 600 total. Let me just put it to you like this. When we went into Iraq, one of the first things they did was create an Iraqi central bank, and that contract was given to JP Morgan. The reason I know all this is because I made a video about it. You can go and look at all the links separately on my Facebook page, Jim Grant Comedy. Click videos, and then you'll click a video called How to Kill 4,000 Disabled People. A deliberately provocative title so people watch it. And I put down all the links and all the sources that I mentioned it in there. So to continuing, who got that contract to run the Iraqi central bank was JP Morgan. And from then, after that, Tony Blair receives a salary, consultant salary from JP Morgan. So I'm going from memory, and I put all the sources on my video, Jim Grant Comedy. Now I don't know whether he still receives.
So he's even worse than a war criminal.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm just, because I've said that, I'm now gonna that I wasn't a situation that I was gonna go off on a tangent on, but I just wanted to give you an idea.
Nice work,
that maybe the Prime Minister's salary isn't the primary thoughts on his mind. Yeah. So I'm going to Google JP Morgan. Do you want to have any of your thoughts on all that madness and what I've just said? 3 times people more dying of flu and pneumonia than the virus.
Nothing shocking anymore to it. I'm a bit surprised that they've drawn flu deaths back into the scenario, because I was going to mention earlier, as you're aware, that a negative test result can be overridden by an assessment of symptoms. And of course, that's another thing that, how significant it is to the total COVID death numbers is, again, another thing that's unstable and open to debate. But symptom assessment is enough for a diagnosis, and including on the death certificate. So that's an element of it that's, added to the mix. And then you then have an instability that can potentially, and assumedly had, as we know, I think we talked about this before, but it's quite well believed and understood that because the epidemic had reached American shores long before it was acknowledged, that they had already assumed to have misdiagnosed deaths to the flu that were most likely COVID. So this is all part of the confusion of the entire tallying and counting. So the point being that for quite a chunk of time, flu deaths were being, as you know, skydiving deaths and falling off the curb and hitting your head deaths were being rerouted into the COVID lane. And now suddenly, after seemingly, I think you and I can both agree, probably 2 months worth of no flu deaths at all, and not even flu diagnoses. So I joked about it several times. You may have yourself seen, that we've eradicated flu. Just here we are in the peak of flu season. Just no flu existed, but all these COVID deaths were happening. So assumedly, COVID had overridden both physically and statistically the even existence of flu, and now here we are, oddly, in August, not particularly flu season, end of July, not particularly flu season. Now suddenly the flu is making a resurgence, Jim, but it's neck and neck in a dogfight with COVID at the same time, and now, as you've mentioned, dominating the statistics against COVID. So it's just, it's all watch the film Gaslight, and you'll have some idea what the government's doing to us.
So,
the government, the epi-government, as Jim mentioned. Let's define that. Those above the government that are implementing policy on top of, ourselves, but through the government. Sorry, I mistakenly suggested the government was in charge of something.
So, anyone would say, why would they deliberately do something that's going to lose them votes? Let me put it to you like this. I'm not going to claim anything, no secret knowledge. I have no sources. I'm not a journalist. I just look at history, and I'm going to give you a little bit of some articles that are drawn out over the internet over the last 20 years. So, why would Boris Johnson and others in his cabinet deliberately want to make themselves look bad and make everybody scared, when it's going to make them look incompetent and lose them votes, and they might, not putting some. We know that COVID's going to be executing a more elderly, or killing, I should say, the more elderly. Loads of Freudian slips here. We know that COVID kills the elderly more than any other age group, and we believe that Boris Johnson's handling of the affair, especially in care homes, well, there are people that believe his government's handling of the affair is criminally negligent. That was, that person who believes they're suing him in a court of law. We're not saying that. We're just saying that,
means something else. I was just waving.
The idea I'm getting to is, why would a government do something so badly and do things that would affect their own voting population so badly? Because all politicians want to do is get re-elected, right? Re-elected to that 120 grand a year salary, right? Okay, so I just want you to bear in mind that people ask that question. I'm now going to give you 3 articles, and I'm sure our cruise listeners will be able to put the pieces of this together here. So we're going to start with the fact that it was Tony Blair's 45-minute of mass destruction speech, and you've got numerous articles written where loads of people in his own cabinet and his own lawyers said, "Oh, are you sure you want to go down that road, Tony? It's a bit dodgy, isn't it?" So here we are, from the benefit of
Claire Short resigned.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff.
With honor.
So here we are. Okay, let's put the pieces of the puzzle together. So the whole Iraq thing stank, and it was Tony Blair that did the 45-minute mass destruction thing and the dodgy dossier. Common knowledge, all right? That's just fact, all right? So I'm going to put 3 little pieces of the article together for you, all right? So why would, and we knew at the time Tony Blair was going to lose votes with his Labour, traditionally left-wing group, bombing Iraq and making all this up. That was of no surprise to anybody. He's going to be making enemies in his own cabinet. He's going to be making enemies of his own voters, right? Why would a politician do that at the time? Well, with 20 years of hindsight, here's 3 articles I'd like you to remember about why COVID-19, why a government may not act in its own best voting interests. Here's the 3 articles for you. So this is New York Times by Bloomberg News, August 30th, 2003. JP Morgan selected to run new trade bank in Iraq. JP Morgan Chase has been selected to operate a bank the United States is creating in Iraq to manage billions of dollars to finance imports and exports. JP Morgan will lead a group that includes 13 banks representing 13 countries to run the bank for 3 years, said Peter McPherson, the top United States economic advisor in Iraq.
Wow.
Piece of the puzzle number 1. Right. Piece of the puzzle number 2. This is from the Telegraph. Oh, it's deciding to be an arse now. I've got to start my free trial here. All right, I can read the headline at the top of it. All right. Tony Blair to earn $2 million as JP Morgan advisor. And I'm afraid I can't get the dates because I've got to go and do the old Telegraph thing. But that's quite an old.
In the trough. Wow.
Okay. All right. Piece of the puzzle number 3.
Wow.
2nd of July 2012. Grin and share it. Former PM Tony Blair alleged to have earned up to £80 million since 2007. This is by This Is Money, 2nd July 2012. Former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair could have earned as much as £80 million since leaving office 5 years ago. Compare that with 120k. All right. So for any listeners, why would they? All government cares about is getting re-elected and voting. Well, I've just put you. Tony Blair knew full well that was going to ruin his legacy. He was a very popular prime minister at that point. He knew full well that was going to happen. If there's one thing I cannot say about Tony Blair, I don't think he's a stupid man. I think he's an incredibly intelligent man. So, and he said it on his own, didn't he? He knew at the time, but it had to be done for the best interests of the nation.
Well,
Right? Well,
he's not spiritually intelligent. He's spiritually bereft. So, you know, if there's any belief in a reckoning or an afterlife or any sort of accountability for your soul, he's a very stupid man.
yeah.
But he's, you know, he's got 80 million quid to consider before he shuffles off the mortal coil, Jim. If indeed he ever does, you know, he might be freezing his brain parts, or I can only imagine the plans that people like you know, like that have. They're in a different spectrum of human, I think, for us.
Probably makes sense for him to keep his body cold because his soul's going somewhere hot, I think.
Great incentive there, yes, absolutely.
And
Doing the old Walt Disney cryogenic brain freeze.
Yeah, how many of Iraqi women and children? Anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million.
500,000 and
dead.
1 million. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Was it worth it,
we haven't
Madeline?
even.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it was. Well done.
Oh no. To be fair, wasn't the Madeleine Albright thing? Wasn't that about sanctions the first time in Iraq?
Well, that's exactly what was believed to have killed that many women and children, was the sanctions, not the war. That's pre the war. Yeah. That's a second tally of associated deaths with the policies towards Iraq.
Yeah, that was the siege before the invasion, wasn't it? So
interestingly enough, it also hasn't changed in policy to, you know, it's current in Lebanon right now. It's current in Syria. It's current in Yemen, more pointedly, even that our policies, particularly of boycotts and sanctions, are murdering people wholesale right now, Jim, on the earth right now. It's like zero has been learned of the past, and quite the opposite is true. You know, well. We just live in we live in a mad world. There's no other way to describe it. A murderous mad world.
Yeah, and not even just murderous as well, birth defect creating world as well, because of course we haven't taken into account. We've mentioned the siege where we slaughtered a load of kids. We've mentioned the invasion where we slaughtered a load of kids. We forgot to mention the depleted uranium, which has given birth defects to many kids and miscarriages and all those kind of things. So I bet those Iraqis are loving their liberty. Almost as much as Tony Blair is enjoying his $2 million a year salary from JP Morgan, that has accounted for up to that, into that 80 million, who now run the Iraqi central bank, that only is a result of the dodgy dossier which he stood up in our Houses of Parliament, paid for with my taxpayer money. To be, you know, there you go. So I just wanted to give an idea of what. Not every government. Why would a government do something that looks bad? Jim. Just wanted to give an historical account of a
why perhaps
a
policy counter to the will of the people is taken. I get it 100%. Yeah, so I agree. And I see the overtones and the parallels of now.
Yeah. So if that's the case, Jim, then I don't see anybody giving money to Boris Johnson. No, that's all nonsense. Well, I tell you what, go and look at who's in that SAGE committee. Oh, you can't. That's right. It's kept secret.
Yeah, and to say also that this is the largest crime perpetrated against any populace, let alone much of the global populace, since World War II, without doubt, in my humble assessment.
Alleged crime.
Well,
they might just be doing for our own good. They might have just done this all for our own good, Craig, because that's a lovely article, lovely comment to bring us on to our next article. This is the Mail Online, and this is by Danielle Hussein. Lockdown killed 2 people for every 3 that died of coronavirus. assuming, of course, that was died from and not with, of course.
Sure.
16,000
More
people, and the tests that they did, the
17
test were accurate.
Sure.
And and not to mention the antibody test actually tested for that particular virus. But assuming all of that, I'll reread
Assuming
the
a lot,
article again.
yeah.
Yeah, a lockdown killed 2 people for every 3 that died of coronavirus. 16,000 people in the UK died in 5 weeks as hospitals shut down to deal with COVID, while 25,000 died from the
Yep.
virus. I mean, not to
Jim,
mention,
Jim,
of
what's
course, the
going
misdiagnosis.
Sure. And what's
So
going forward, as we mentioned in previous episodes, full steam ahead. New lockdowns in Melbourne, Australia, against all of the, you can read this evidence today, yet policy is still applying itself to further, make catastrophic errors of judgment that lead to human life lost. And we just, I've heard a couple of appraisals this week that I concur with, Jim, that we're just, and I mentioned it earlier, we're being gaslit. We're in a situation where the evidence counter to apparently sane, you can only imagine, everyone in Australia has access to first world living, nutrition, they're famous for sport, health, their minds presumably are believed scientifically to be working like the rest of ours, yet they're having a known policy of death and destruction placed upon them by entirely insane overlords that, again, similar to whether it's the governors who sent ill people into care homes in the States, or whether it's the politicians in the UK that did the same thing, entirely unaccountable politicians moving forward with deadly policies that are known, as the article that Jim just mentioned, defunct of any rational application of science, yet it's still happening now. That's what we're dealing with. It can't be a mistake, Jim.
16,000 people died because they couldn't get health care from March 23rd to May the 1st.
Incredible.
At the same time.
Incredible.
25,000 Britons died of coronavirus at the pandemic's height. Again, assuming all the 3 things were accurate. Of the 16,000, 6,000 were unwell people who were too scared to go to A&E.
Yeah,
it is feared that 85,500 people could die over the next 50 years because of lockdown.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's a number pulled out the ether, isn't it, really?
Sure.
Over 50 years. I mean, I as much as I agree with that article, I don't think that that's a very
it has a very
sound
it has a very 12 years before we all die from climate change ring to it.
Yeah.
But a bit of me is more in belief of that potential statistic.
But here's one that I can jump on board with. Here's one I can jump on board with. In the next 5 years, 1,400 could die as they were diagnosed with cancer. So I'm amazed it's that low, actually, the 1,400 there. So, but who knows? But these figures are pulled out the ether, and maybe it was Neil Ferguson doing the figures. So, lockdown killed 2 people for every 3 that died of coronavirus. Shocking new government figures have revealed.
Shocking.
It is thought that as
shocking. I love these, Jim. I got to try. Who's shocked? How can we be shocked? It's like, we're living in a cacophony of utter insanity. There's no shock left. My shock is that they can possibly say something as incredulous as shocking. Just like choose a different superlative, because that doesn't work anymore.
Well, none of the Cruise podcast listeners will be shocked, because this was something we were warning about on our first ever episode, which was, I remember we did one. We did one on April the 1st.
Do it, Jim.
There was a little gap, wasn't there? There was a little gap between episodes 1 and 2, wasn't there? And then from 2 we hit the ground running. Yeah. So from what I remember,
27 weeks ago, Jim.
Yeah.
Our first episode.
But even on episodes 1 and 2, we were saying, look, we're not against lockdown at this point, but we do need to keep a track on it, because if you shockingly, Craig, if you shut down an entire economy, including its medical system, and
Yeah.
put your people under essential house
House arrest.
detainment,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
it's not good for their health, and there are
No.
possible detrimental effects. I know. What are the odds?
Yeah.
Even when we were on board with the
Emphasis on
lockdown, we were
mental.
saying, we were careful. This sword, it's a double-edged sword. We're
Sure.
not denying that the
Yeah.
lockdown edge is going to have some good to it, and it's
Sure.
going to,
Yeah.
kill some of those virus deaths. We're not denying that, but be careful, because the other side of that blade is actually pretty sharp as well.
And isn't it striking as well, Jim? I must make mention that the actual total number of deaths in Australia, not even the province of Victoria, well, or where Melbourne is, are not. I don't know what the numbers are specifically. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 270 or something for the whole country. And don't quote me on that, but they're low. They're low statistically for the planet, for comparative regions, and similarly, the Philippines has gone into a mask mandate rampage. So again, with low COVID numbers or low proven COVID deaths. So we just there's nothing, again, Jim, that is rational in terms of like cause and effect. The draconian policies of certain regions of the world are not reflective of a greater risk to the public at large, but more reflective of an authoritarian behavior of the policymakers. I was going to say at the top, but at the top of what we're led to believe is the system that we contribute to with the vote every few years, which is, of course, as nonsensical as you can possibly imagine.
The new figures were presented to the government's Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, in brackets SAGE, in the middle of July. That's that group we're not allowed to know who's on it. They were calculated
allowed
by.
To know about 38 of them, Jim. You're definitely not allowed to know the 2 military contributions, which are the only ones that seem in any way to be independent of the influence of the G-man. We don't have to go deeper into that. Everybody who watches us know what we're talking about, and I'm too bored of it to even mention it again.
The 16,000 people who died included 6,000 who couldn't go to A&E during lockdown because they feared catching the virus. This is pretty much breaking down what I read in their headline. So I'll go on to our next article here.
Right.
Again, if you want to read the whole article for yourself, it's in the. Do you post the articles in the original description of the video, or do you wait for me to put them in the comment section, Craig?
On Cruise, on Facebook Cruise, I wait for you to put them in. On YouTube, I mount them with the episode.
In which case, I've got a little bit of homework to do, Mr. Campbell.
With the time delay, I like to harvest them from your Cruise comment, and then I can put them across in a copy and paste without much effort there.
I know what I'm going to be doing this evening then. I shall be going on to the Cruise and adding them all into the comments section, everything like that. But you can always read what you say.
Yeah,
but, I mean,
there's not the same breakdown in the Facebook mounting to have the
I remember now. That's why I asked. Yep. So I'll be putting those comments in there, and a big thank you to Martina, who shared our video and and shared our YouTube thingy on our Facebook page, and actually went to the trouble to write. They sourced everything they say, so we did. So if you want to read the rest of the article for yourself, do it. We're just bringing this stuff onto yourself, and of course you can go and read all the rest of Tony Blair's little money-making schemes as well. All those articles I read out, they've got little links to all the other people giving them a little bit of wedge over the years. So here's the article referring to what I was saying earlier. This is a Forbes article by Tommy Beer. CDC says possibly less than half of positive antibody tests are correct. In updated guidance posted on its website over the weekend, the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention acknowledged an inability to accurately determine if individuals had been infected with COVID-19 via antibody tests. If the test is used in a population where prevalence is low, it's possible that less than half of those testing positive will truly have antibodies.
Incredible, John.
There are 2 kinds of COVID-19 tests.
The CDC is like a drowning man right now. It's just incredible. I wonder if they're doing this just to try and save face and credibility before they're disbanded, like the U.S. funding for the WHO. They're just it's free fall. We're just in a free fall. There's none of these bodies can be trusted to save their lives, and now they're pointing. Sorry to interrupt, Jim. It's just this makes me sick when I hear these bodies being quoted. Who could trust them? Why would we trust them now? There's no reason to trust them at all. They're known fabricators and liars and misrepresenters of fact. So that they're now trying to save face by presenting new statistics is just it's insulting.
Well, the reason to keep lying, Craig, is there's so many people in what I call the cult of lie. LII, the cult of the low informationally informed. And I use the word cult deliberately because a cult likes to separate you. It separates you from friends and family and says, don't listen to what they're saying, listen to what we're saying. It says you not to think for yourself, but to read from the texts that we have anointed. These are the approved lists. You learn from our wise ones or anything like that. And when you get in that, the cult of the low informationally informed, they just do whatever these people say because they put them on a pedestal. And also, the second reason is they've been on social media slagging off anyone that is a conspiracy theorist, anyone that critically acknowledges anything like that. It's almost like tribal warfare there. What? Who are the people that have said things that I think are conspiracy theories over the years? Are they saying I shouldn't trust the CDC or the CDC's facts? Right, I'm going to put on Facebook that these people are all idiots and that you need to trust everything, you're putting lives at risk or anything like that. So when their own God comes to them and says, actually, I have been completely wrong, then they don't want to. No, I don't want to. I love you, God. I don't want to be. You are perfect. And also that I've now emotionally invested my ego into putting so many posts on Facebook to say how wonderful you are, or anything like that. It's much easier for me to believe that, do you know what? The person that shared that article, I'm going to go into my cognitive dissonance. It makes me feel bad to read that truth. So now, because in the past you were the person questioning me in the past and you've been proven to be right, I'm now going to say exactly the same thing and double down and say, you were wrong then, you're wrong now. I'm in the cult of lie. So that's what I see on Facebook, the cult of the low information informed. It's not intelligence that's stopping a lot of people from
I won't forget that for a while.
Yeah.
You got some real jowl action going there, Jim. Well done.
It's not getting this stuff through to people now because it's all there now. It's all there. The pieces of the puzzle are there to be. Now,
absolutely,
it's all there that this is a nonsense. The second layer of that is that there may be an agenda behind that nonsense. All right, that is a conspiracy theory.
Sure.
We can't go there. But the fact that the antibody tests, tests are, quote, possibly less than I've scrolled down now, but you heard it for yourself. Dying from and with is all admitted. We're all there now. The problem is that people have become emotionally invested by saying these people have been right all along. These have been people have right all along. Don't knock all the tests. You're damaging lives and morale and everything like that. Oh, what you were right? All the tests were potentially incredibly inaccurate, and all the resulting lockdown, the result of it could be inaccurate as well. No, I don't want to have to post that on Facebook and admit that I've been completely wrong for the last 6 months. I don't want that to be wrong. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be wrong. And God, I've been calling for these people to be banned over this, because I want they're not going to apologize. They're going to go, I want even more people banned, because the last thing I want to hear is a load of these people saying, I told you so. That's the cult of lie, ladies and gentlemen. It's not intelligence or a lack of intelligence stopping these people from getting it, or even a lack of literacy. It's all there if they want to read it, but they don't want to read it. Just as a smoker isn't dumb. A smoker doesn't think when he smokes that cigarette, oh, this is good for me. He just does it because it feels good. It feels good, and going off those withdrawal symptoms is going to feel bad. So just keep it there. It feels good to put your trust in all these systems. It feels good to have the government. Oh, I want the government to think everyone's in my best interests here. That's what I want to believe. That's the world I want to believe. It makes me feel bad to have to think that this whole thing is not. Yeah, keeping the fantasy going. The cult of the low informationally informed. In the age of information, Ignorance
Sure.
is a choice, and it's a choice often made by the ego and the feelings that you don't want to feel bad. That's my rant over for the day.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. It probably it it didn't need, but it could have used a flourish. Right, right. Yeah, it wouldn't have got a miss, Jim. It stands on its own powerfully, but the head shake is a real with the sound effect. It's a real punctuation point. I shan't forget for some time. I can tell you.
Yeah. If they don't want to believe that this is an agenda-driven
Oh,
pandemic,
sure.
at least look at the facts that the numbers are and the tests are wrong slash inaccurate. Okay,
It's
you
project.
don't. Yeah, look at
It's
level
project.
one, guys. Look at
Yeah.
level one. Level two. Why are they wrong? We don't need to go there. Just accept that they are highly questionable in all areas, the antibody tests, the test itself, and the figures and the death rate, because of how, with, and from, and all that kind of stuff, are highly inaccurate. Maybe it's best that we don't shove anyone back under these lockdowns and collapse an entire global economy, which is going to cause deaths. Like we said, two for every three. That's with their dodgy numbers. And imagine what it's going to be like down the line when you add on homelessness and economic deprivation and starvation to that with food supply sources. You
Absolutely,
do
Jim.
another lockdown, it
Wow,
ain't
you're
going to
on
be
it
two.
now.
Yeah,
Now you're hitting the notes.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's all
It ain't
floating in my head while you're talking. Yeah, well
it ain't
done.
it ain't going to be two definites for three
Yeah,
maybes. It's going to
yeah,
be five definites for two maybes. Right?
totally. Yeah, if we're lucky. Absolutely. Yeah. Hideous, hideous but true. And it is a cult. There's not the questioning of the narrative, seemingly. You know, whether it's the investment or investment of effort to rectify your own interpretation of what's being done to us, or whether it's what's the term I'm looking for? Whether it's the cognitive processes that reject counter narratives to a cult member, the Stockholm syndrome type concept of bearing in mind there's a fear to step into a world that might disillusion you to the reality that you're accepting, and I also accept that, Jim. There's certainly a lot of psychological processes going on that are preventing people from. Oh, I say this actually. I don't want to get depressed like last week's episode, Jim, because there are also yesterday, Sunday, there were protests, particularly in Liverpool, for fighting the mask mandates. Take off the mask. So whatever huge numbers they are, whatever tiny numbers they are, there are numbers. There are finally pockets and groups of people, certainly in the UK, and hopefully more, maybe on the back of the protests a week ago in Germany, where people are waking up and they're coming together to say they've had enough. They don't trust the government's information on any of this, and they certainly don't trust unstable information to mandate policies that have further repercussions of their own health and their own behavior. So, I don't want to go down the black hole of being another source for people of fear and terror. There are rays of hope. To what degree, we'll see as time goes on. But there are people that are standing up, and there are people that have had enough, and it's wonderful to see. So I was about to say that it's a Stockholm syndrome thing, Jim, and nobody ever crosses the threshold, and it's partisan, blah blah blah. But that's not the case. There are people who are, and similarly to I think each microcosm, each person's particular scenario, are suffering extra excommunication from their own families and friendship circles for some of those awakenings. So there has to be tribute given to people who have the strength of character and the fortitude to realize they've been led down the garden path and are now wanting to make peace with that and rectifying their position to a more current current statistics model of how the world is affecting them. I don't want to depress that. That's a great thing. That's a good thing.
Yep. I just wanted to say to people, you don't have to be all the way down the conspiracy theory hole. You don't even have to go to the fact that there's an agenda
Sure.
behind that. All you have to believe for this to end is that government is incompetent or has been led by dodgy tests. That's all you've got to believe. And then go and research it, how the tests are dodgy in the first place. That's all you've got to do. You don't have to go all the way down the rabbit hole. Just the entrance of the rabbit hole that says from loads of mainstream sources that the tests are dodgy, with and from are two different things. That will be enough if you can just get that into your head and other people's heads. And I know it's already in the Cruise
A
podcast's
seed
head.
of
I'm
doubt.
already preaching for that.
Seed of doubt.
I'm not speaking to the podcast listeners who have been listening to us loyal from day one. I'm talking about things to say when you go and have a normal conversation with one of the people that is trapped in this world of misinformation. They want to be led by the science. Well, the science says the tests are dodgy, the antibody tests are dodgy, the numbers are exaggerated. There's nothing accurate about what the government is telling you. And even the only thing accurate about the government telling you is the government telling you in the last couple of weeks that they have been inaccurate. That's the only accurate thing that they've said. We've covered that on previous podcasts where Herr Gruber, aka Matt Hanker,
Ah,
do you know what? We may have a few accounting errors here. Don't worry about that. So that's all we need to do. So, and that's all. We don't want another lockdown. We don't want another lockdown. And all we need to do is look at what happened during the first lockdown, and the numbers and the science are there to go. Do you know what? It might not be a good idea to shove people back in their homes and collapse a global economy based on false evidence. You don't even need to go down that rabbit hole. That's all we need to do for this,
true
people.
that.
You know?
True that. True
Yeah.
that, Jim.
So our
Really
next
coming here, coming into your own now. This 20th episode. It's it's the volcano of Jim Grant. He's off. He's hitting every note. I love it.
yeah, well, it's not conspiracy theory when this is
No.
what I don't get. The government go, do you know what? Yeah, everything's dodgy. We've made massive mistakes on everything, and the government. It's almost like the people who are going to go, oh. Just, I'll tell you what. Let's just go for the worst case scenario, and we'll just have another lockdown just in case.
There
It's
is a lot of that.
yeah, it's madness now, and we've reached the point of counterproductivity lockdown wise. And in fact, actually, there's more articles. If I stop ranting and raving,
Right.
then
Hit it.
we'll go there and
Nice.
look down the
Sure.
switch. So, just a quick one on this one. A different something off now for something completely different, as Monty Python would say.
Aha.
BBC Beirut explosion. Angry residents rage at leaders after blast.
I said Bud Light.
People in Beirut have expressed anger. I actually didn't get that one.
Oh,
But,
sorry.
what's the joke? Explain it.
It's a series. It's a series of Budweiser Light commercials that usually involved an explosion as a contrast to. No, I said Bud Light. So almost anything incendiary could be juxtaposed with just actually. And in fact, interestingly, I saw it, and I don't know, but I'm assuming it was actually. You can look into it yourself. That case of, I think it's three lawyers in the States that are now looking at life in prison for throwing a Molotov cocktail at police or a police vehicle. Their Molotov cocktail was made in a Bud Light bottle, Jim. So I don't know if it was like a perverse dark humor. My presumption would be yes, in terms of the myriad of numbers of beers available to make a Molotov cocktail out of. To choose a Bud Light to do so, there's that like kind of a photo, an incriminating photo of, I think, one of the women. There's two women and one man who had a Molotov made with a Bud Light, and I giggled, Jim. I presumably they were being humorous at the time. I think it's a lot less funny to them now, but yeah, that's the Bud Light joke.
A lot less funny to the people on the receiving end of the Molotov cocktail.
I guess, yeah, absolutely. Can I say, Jim, The best if you're in any way that way minded. If you like spending late night on the internet, YouTube particularly, looking for old beer advertisement series. I can highly recommend Rainier beer. Again, in the beer category, the Yanks have always had a particular vying for supremacy of entertainment value of beer commercials. I think probably arguably culminating in the Super Bowl being the main prominent point of production. But Rainier beer, they would they were particularly creative. I think they were more through the 80s, but you can obviously watch all of them in a row on YouTube with whatever you want in your belly or your mind and have a little giggle. My all-time favorite is it's said to be made with mountain water from the Rainier region of Washington. If you're not familiar, it's the Rainier Mountain is the sister mountain of Mount St. Helens, of this series of volcanoes that are on the San Andreas Fault up the west coast of the U.S. and then through Canada, in between Canada, the mainland of Vancouver and Vancouver Island, and then on up to Alaska, where the head of that fault line produces Mount Denali, or McKinley as it's called, as the volcano that's the highest mountain in North America and the highest mountain in the world north of the Arctic Circle. So all along this fault line, volcanoes. Once you're from Denali, then you come down into Canada and just near Whistler, British Columbia. There's Gabriola, I think, or no, not Gabriola. It's believed to be dormant volcano, but it's particularly threatening, and it's a super volcano in its past, so it has huge potential. And then you cross over to the border into Washington, you get Mount St. Helens, and then you're down to Mount Rainier, where the mountain spring water makes Rainier beer. And one of the greatest commercials, well, that I saw in my youth was a guy on a motorbike on a country road. It's wonderfully shot, Jim, very cinematic, long distance shot, and you can only see the trail of the rooster tail of the gravel and the dust coming out from behind an approaching motorbike. And as it comes through, the throttle shift goes Rainier beer. And you can see the thing head off. And the other one I have to digress to tell you is no, I won't even go into it. If you want to see some good fun commercials on the back of the Bud Light joke, go ahead and watch the Rainier beer commercials.
I have just had an idea, Craig. And Sean Collins and you did the TV show around that. Well, could be series 2. You go to places where these commercials were filmed and go and look at the places that they were filmed and show the original commercials. You're going to be tapping into a market full of people who are everyone likes. Exactly. Nostalgia is a big money-making thing, especially for a marketing campaign. Well, look at the movies. They don't make new ones anymore. No. They just bring back the old franchises, flog them to death and ruin them. But nostalgia is a big thing, don't they? Sure. So you could do that. You and Sean could go, because the other one was dope, wasn't it? So you can go now look at beer. Yeah, go to the scenes around the world where different beer adverts were made. I think you could do that and go and try see if the original beers are still brewed, and
anything. If an episode could get me to Japan, Jim, and I could go have a Kirin or even an Asahi in Japan, that would be a beautiful culmination of that idea. Thanks for planting that seed, Jim.
Yeah, you could do that. That could be season 2 of you and Sean's show. But I'm glad you did explain the Budweiser thing as regards to the Beirut explosion, because I haven't watched mainstream television since 2011, and you were explaining about Budweiser or anything
Nice.
like that, and I'm trying to go on my knowledge of that Budweiser adverts from 10 years ago, and I'm looking at it like thinking, what does a bomb blast in Beirut have to do with frogs? Budweiser.
Of
That
course, of
was the
course.
last beer
Yeah,
advert I watched 10
frogs.
years ago.
Well, these are, as mentioned, are memories from the 80s and 90s, Jim. That's the last time I had a television infecting the premises of my abode. 1997 was the last time I had a TV anywhere near my life, and so all these memories are from, again, nostalgia, Jim, nostalgia.
Yeah, just these frogs in Beirut. They wouldn't be going Budweiser. They'd be going run like fuck. You know, that's what they would be shouting if there was a blast or anything like that. But anyway, we don't want to make in any way light
Frogs.
or we don't want to take the mickey out of
Oh,
the
yeah.
blast that killed
More than we already done
137 people and
so
injured
far.
5,000. A very somber affair, and our thoughts are
Absolutely.
with all the families and everything like that. But
Absolutely.
we're a couple of insensitive comedians freewheeling here, so our thoughts to everyone that passed away and their families there. And we shall now move on to talking about people that could potentially get offended. Good on Ricky Gervais. We've mentioned him before, but this is another article here. The 7th of August, Sharon Loffer, again by the Metro. And this is Ricky Gervais calls out celebrity cancel culture. Trying to get someone fired isn't cool. Good for him. It's fair to say you won't catch Ricky Gervais recording image during lockdown. He started the year in savage form with his takedown of woke Hollywood at the Golden Globes and is in familiar biting mood when it comes to COVID and celebs. I saw that. I thought it was really good what he said and did, and the way he delivered it as well. Even the threat of cancel culture, which has seen Twitter outrage mobs ignore the context, nuance, and irony of a comedian's work in an attempt to get them axed, won't rein him in. Everyone's got a different definition of cancel culture, explained Gervais, 59. I've never met or worked with Ricky, but I've really loved how he's stuck up for free speech over the last couple of years. Have you ever worked with Mr. Gervais?
I've not, no, but I do find an affinity with his work and his opinion, particularly along the lines of what you've just read. And interestingly, that he, I believe his mother is French Canadian, either his mother or his father, which was explained to me oddly by a French Canadian in Brighton, a cabbie, was giving me more information than I ever knew about Ricky Gervais before, but that's where the French last name comes from. So it's probably his father who's a French Canadian, and I don't know if that means that he's adopted or what his actual genesis is, but I've always found that a little bit curious, and of course, although I haven't downloaded The Office and done a deep dive on that, I've always respected and appreciated the cut of his jib as it goes.
Yeah, our next article here tonight is less of an article, really, and so it's not really dated. But
I quite like his sidekick. He was the
Carl Pilkington.
No, the other one that he worked with,
Stephen
Merchant, Stephen Merchant. Yeah, I ran into him just at random once on the tube, so I think on the Piccadilly line, and had a few rides of the stations and a nice conversation, and of course was continually the entire time, because I'd only ever seen him on television, so it was that kind of surreal. I'm sure you've experienced that before, where you just, the person who you're in front of, you've only ever seen on TV, and you have that like heightened sense of thinking that you have a rapport with them or a relationship, and then you have to keep catching yourself to realize this person doesn't know me at all. I can't like talk to them like I know them, but I was struck the entire time that he's just like, I don't know if he's 6'6" or 6'8", or he's a tall guy, and it was that kind of. The height didn't come across on television, so I was constantly having to adjust to how lanky the dude was.
Wow, you're having to adjust. I'd get neck ache. Yeah, so this we never got to cover it on last week's show, but I covered it because we so often run out. I covered it on my radio show that I do for Bexhill Online, that said coronavirus was more deadly to people over 6 feet. Do you remember I read it out as what's coming up in our show last show? But I had trouble believing, and it probably isn't the best broadcast because I'm laughing on air, but it almost seems to think that the scientific reason for this is because they are higher, their nose is going to be getting more of.
Oh, right. So it's actually a physical, rather than a physiological.
All of this stuff, they can't even figure out what antibody tests are there and whether someone died from or with. This is somewhat. It's just madness.
Yeah,
but
it's more nonsense.
Yeah, so this is not a news article. I think this is the first time I've read out something that isn't a news article, and it was last reviewed on July the 10th, and next review is on July the 10th. But this is from the NHS's own website, and I'll put a link onto it. And I'll just read out what the page says. Like I said, this isn't a news article, and I don't know any more about it than I'm going to read out on this page. I just wanted to make our listeners in the UK aware of this. So make your choice. Choose if data from your health records is shared for research and planning. So use the surface to choose if your confidential patient information is used for research and planning. Change or check your current choice. Your choice will be applied by NHS Digital and Public Health England, all other health and care organisations by September 2020, delayed for March 2020 to allow organisations to focus on the COVID-19 outbreak. Read more about the extension to the compliance deadline for the national data opt-out. Any choice you will make will not impact your individual care. You must be aged 13 or older, have access to your email or mobile phone, have your NHS number or postcode registered with your GP surgery. Other ways to make a choice by yourself or phone or by someone else by post. So this was any cruise listeners here in the UK. You've got the opportunity until September to choose if your data and everything is used for research and planning. So all the links are on the site. I don't know how it's done or exactly what and who it's being used by or for or anything like that. I don't have that information. But
I'm not going to get us taken off the air to finish that conversation, Jim. But people can dig a bit deeper for themselves and see where their data is being harvested to and by and for in your own time.
Yeah, I just thought, let's make that.
Maybe we can save that for the BitChute episode, Jim.
Yeah, sure. I don't actually know more about it than
I'll send you some info on that.
Yeah, than
it's quite and also people can choose to opt out now, or must choose if you wish to opt out of the organ donation rather than the automatic opt-in. It's now shifted to you must opt out should you wish to do that. So for your own reasons, if you wish. I can't imagine there's anything left on me that can be beneficial to someone else, but they already got my foreskin, the pricks. But I'm waiting for that check. But yeah, that's it's a contentious subject, obviously, but good that you've offered it, Jim.
Yeah, I just thought I'd make that aware to our listeners that that's going on, that something is going on with your data and your organs and all that stuff. And I just wanted to make certain our UK cruise listeners were aware of it. And that link will be put there should you want to go and follow it through and do whatever you need to do and make your own choices. We'll put that link on whatever podcast you're listening to, unless you're listening to this on our Anchor audio form, in which case you're probably best liking our Facebook page, Cruise, or checking us out on YouTube, because I don't think we can put the descriptions in the Anchor thing there. There's too many of them, I think. But we shall see. So our next article will change tact again, something a little bit more light-hearted, I suppose. This is from the Express.
Good.
Egypt, lost ancient text shining new light on Cleopatra as experts close in on tomb. Egypt archaeologists have uncovered a number of forgotten and unpublished texts which are shining a new light on Cleopatra as investigators close in on our final resting place. This is from Monday, August the 3rd. So it's by Callum Hoare. Yeah, H-O. Yeah, I haven't butchered his name. So the
Right now.
yes, the last ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. I've butchered that for sure. Anyway, you can see it for yourself. The last ruler of a certain kingdom of Egypt is perhaps one of the most famous of all pharaohs, but her tomb has never been found in the 2,000 years since her death. However, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez is convinced she has pinpointed its location 30 miles outside the center of Alexandria in a location known as Taposiris Magna. She revealed during Channel 5 series The Hunt for Cleopatra's Tomb. Now she had uncovered 200 coins bearing Cleopatra's name, a statue of her great-grandfather, and the mummies of two high-ranking officials. During the series, presenter and fellow Egyptologist Dr. Glenn Gordeno noted how a breakthrough has been made in learning more about the ancient ruler. He said, although information about Cleopatra is scarce, some recent discoveries of forgotten and unpublished texts are shining a new light on the Queen. So there's more to go on, but I want some more articles. So yeah, what do you think of that?
Well, I'm always a keen, curious mind towards Egyptology and that particular study. So I love that. It made me remember the oddity and what's that? The Tutankhamun's grave containing the dagger made of meteorite, interestingly, and fashioned. They obviously, like every ancient mystery, no idea how they were able, with tools from the age that they are purporting that that Tutankhamun hailed from, that they were in any way able to manipulate the material that was turned into a dagger and that he was found buried with. So that in its own way I find quite curious. But I love all that. I love that part of the world, Jim. I quite like Egypt. I've had a visit there that I had a great time on. I really enjoyed the people that I met there, and from I don't know if it's my appearance, but from like the first hour that I was there, Jim, I got out of the airport and we went down one of the main sort of like shisha strips in Cairo. And then like an old American Cadillac pulled up kind of from behind us and beckoned me over to the window. And they just had like, I'd probably been in Egypt at that point, maybe 4 hours. And like an hour out of the airport, and they just had the most wonderful, massive, like Cheech and Chong blazed up hash joint. And they just called me over to the car, and it just one of the weirdest, like, oh, I don't know why me, but they're just like, you, and I'm like, you fucking picked the right guy, baby. You guys don't look like cops, and just leaned into this Cadillac with these three dudes in it, and just utterly huffed myself insane, and then was able to get on into a cab for about a 7-hour drive down to the Sinai Peninsula and spend a couple of weeks at Dahab, which was just madness. And so I love Egypt. I quite like that part of the world. But interesting, and obviously the Cleopatra segment of history in its own way, and its connection to Alexander the Great. Is it Alexander the Great or Mark Antony? It's Mark Antony. Mark Antony, who stole the heart of the Egyptian queen, or I guess at that point they're not Egyptian back then, were they? Were they not Nubian? I believe, Jim. It was an entirely different culture as well, which has now been sort of taken over by a secondary culture. But yeah, I love all that gear. But I also, and when I saw it on your wall, interestingly, Jim, and by the way, I have to mention, like, if you haven't, you should check out Jim Grant's Facebook page, because he just did all the notes in terms of the sort of oddities of our news cycle, and it's like a mini cruise in itself. But what I did think of immediately, and I'm pretty counterculture when it comes to particularly Egyptology and particularly pyramids and the timeline that's given. So as soon as you start talking about like when Cleopatra was said to exist, and the sort of narratives that are born of that mainstream Egyptology interpretation, I'm quite counter that, Jim. I'm off on the. I believe the pyramids to be much older than they let on in modern. I'm in the. I think you and I have talked about this before. I'm more in the Eric van Daniken type of interpretation of these things. Similarly to the Bosnian, if you believe them, pyramids, which I do. You don't have to like use that to shut down our account, but these are my opinions. That they're closer into the neighborhood, in my belief, of the 25,000-30,000-year-old rather than the 5,500-year-old proposal that the Great Pyramid, particularly of Cheops in Giza, is believed to be. So there's quite a disparity there, and there's a lot of argument between geologists and Egyptologists in terms of the erosion damage on particularly the Sphinx, and there's many reasons to believe that they're not in any way close to 5,000 years old. But it's nice to have those things float through your mind when you think of. For me, I don't know, Jim. I don't know where you're at with it, but I have a place in my mind historically where Cleopatra is just fucking smoking. Like there's whether it's the depiction in glyphs or in hieroglyphs. There's a whether it's her eyeshadow or or cheek shapes or her lips, whatever is going on there. God, they knew how to pick a queen in those days.
Yeah. I should say about my Facebook page, the one you want for the news is called Beyond the News. That's the one that I share my news on. My Jim Grant comedy Facebook page, that's where I put more funny stuff and cute animal pictures and all that kind of stuff. But so I've kept the two separately. One's more humorous, one's more factual, but Beyond the News. And we are looking to try and get my Bexel Online playback facility on there as well, so you can listen to the podcast. Basically, my Bexel Online show is all the articles that I say we'll cover on Cruise and we never get round to because we're too busy putting the world to rights. But
nice.
And often I think of them and I think, oh man, I wish Craig was here to get his comments on this. But so you're going to like our last. You're going to like our last two then, if you like Egypt, because one of them. So this is from today, Craig. This is Monday, the 10th of August, again by Mr. Callum Horn.
2020, the worst year of our lives.
Whenever you say that, I always like go automatically into let's make certain the camera positions, anything like that, because that's how you usually open the show, isn't it? The worst year of our lives. And I think get the camera position, get the articles in there. It's going to be like a Pavlovian response. I'm going to hear that on my deathbed, and I'm going to be like, what articles have got coming up today? But so, most exciting find in Egypt. 6,000-year-old breakthrough rewrites ancient history. This is only today that they found this. Egypt archaeologists have made a stunning breakthrough in understanding the ancient civilization that once inhabited the region up to 6,000 years ago, in what one expert dubbed the most exciting find made. This is from the Express again. Hyrcanopolis, I've butchered that, I'm sure, or City of the
nice
Hawk.
Try. Okay, yeah.
Hera, that's got to be like the old ancient Greek got it. Hyrcanopolis. Anyway, the City of the Hawk is the Greek name for the modern city of Qom el Anmar, which became the religious and political capital of Upper Egypt at the end of the prehistoric era between 3200 BC and 2686 BC.
Wow.
But the earliest settlement may date back more than 6,000 years ago. The first, so that kind of says what you were going on about. The first evidence of its ruins were excavated towards the end of the 19th century by the English archaeologists James Quibell and Frederick Green, who theorized the city had at least 5,000 and possibly as many as 10,000 inhabitants at its height. Since 2001, Dr. Renee Feldman has led the efforts to learn more about the city beginning with H, with her recent developments being documented in Channel 5's new series, Ancient Mysteries, animals of Egypt's underworld. But she revealed how experts discovered this vast area, estimated to be around 3 miles squared, was also hiding a number of bizarre burials that left experts scratching their heads. According to the Express.co.uk, Dr. Friedman said, the city beginning with H is a very important site for the beginning of the Egyptian civilization. It has been known to be an important site for over 100 years. Very important artifacts were found there in 1898. Then in the 70s, we went back to the site to look around some more. We found the cemetery and began excavating it, but not only did we find human burials, we found these very strange animals that took us some time to figure out what they were. Dr. Friedman went on to detail how the team plucked a treasure trove of ancient animal remains from burial tombs. She added, you don't expect to find 7 baboons in a grave and a wildcat and a hippopotamus buried along with humans. We began again in the 90s, and as we excavated, we found some more and more animals. Every time we found a human burial, we would find stranger and stranger animals. Remarkably, Dr. Friedman revealed to the Express that she now believes the ancient civilization captured, cared for, and showed off these exotic animals could be evidence of the world's first ever zoo. She said, although all these animals have obviously been buried, we see that they sustained injuries that were healed and had to be healed under human care. We think that they were in captivity for at least 6 weeks for the injuries to heal, but how much beyond that I can't say. So these animals were kept on site alive. Don't think the whole point was to actually bury them. I think it was to show them off. Dr. Friedman believes keeping the animals in captivity was a show of power to the ancient Egyptians. She continued, to have these animals would prove that the ruler of the site was very wealthy and powerful. Killing animals was easy, but actually bringing them back alive is a lot harder. Imagine an elephant, leopard, or a lion. And just go and look at the work of Hannibal Barker marching the animals through the Alps to give
Yes. I've hiked that route before, Jim. I've hiked the pass that Hannibal brought his elephants through. Curiously, and there's still structure there. It's like slab rock of where Roman soldiers and what would they have been, Carthaginian soldiers, the Hannibal's crew.
Carthaginians,
Carthaginians, I think they were, and where they sheltered. So there's still archaeology there present. It's quite a wild place, interestingly.
So keeping it
it's strange with the animals there, Jim. It just all I could think is that they're probably practicing the mummification process, and try and say that 3 times while you're drunk. The mummification process, and it just made me think that even ancient Egyptians practiced on animals. So think about the COVID-19 vaccine world that we're in right now. We've come so far, huh? We've come so far. We should just leap past the only animal trials that we've done on similar SARS vaccines, of course, ended tragically in the both debilitating necessity of euthanizing those animals and the actual deaths of them. So here we are. But
they'll get it right this time. They're doing it really quickly, and there's no pressure on them or anything.
Sure, and that it can be deferred to other issues and fall into the subterfuge of all the data that we know is unstable to be distracted from when that avalanche befalls us. But let's not go down that route.
Mm-hmm. Keeping it alive is another skill too. We have a leopard, wild cattle, 2 elephants, hippopotami, crocodiles. All these animals represent power. I'm going to put something else out there that I have absolutely no evidence for whatsoever. Pure speculation on my part.
Maybe just let me say
it. No, I'm just going to put some speculation. It makes perfect sense to me that they would hold a zoo. I mean, you would want to in those parts. I mean, imagine what a popular draw that would be. Okay. Imagine the power it would be. Imagine you turn your
information it could provide.
Yeah. Well, I was also going to go down that road. haven't we seen many Egyptology hieroglyphs where there's like animal heads on humans and that kind of
Yes,
stuff?
yeah,
Now,
yeah. Well,
now this could very, very
that's
easily be masks and
morphology.
everything like that. But what if this was some kind of research as well? I'm just going to put that out there. That
Right.
the zoo makes perfect sense to me, but I wouldn't be surprised if they perhaps tried to. We know Egypt was into its alchemy, and there's the hieroglyphs of what looks like an old-fashioned acid battery and that kind of stuff on the
Yes.
hieroglyphs as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
numerous
True,
things on those hieroglyphs that make
true.
you go, these people were interested in a variety of things, including what looks like machinery, art, possibly, like we say, batteries, that kind of stuff. They were into an eclectic mix, and there
Curious
are,
people.
yeah, curious people, and there are lots of pictures of humans with animal heads and that kind of
True.
stuff. So, could they have been doing experimentation
Wild.
as well as a zoo? I don't know. I'm just pure speculation on my part, maybe just based on what some of the hieroglyphs I can recall from my mind. But interesting, isn't it, that
Isn't it?
they
Yeah.
found that?
I thought the timing was interesting also, Jim, because that's right in the era of like the fall of the civilization, I believe. That 2600 number from 3000 to 2600 is essentially when I believe it's quite well studied in terms of supervolcano. I think it might have even been Krakatoa that was believed to have, well, not believed to, through archaeological record, they can see exactly when and where the world was affected by the ash cloud of whether it was Krakatoa or another supervolcano that I can't remember the name of right now, that then led to essentially a nuclear winter and destroyed all of the crops of the Nile basin, and then led to the famine-like conditions that brought down those empires. And then, as you're very aware, I'm sure, the sand came later. So most people don't know that where the crocodiles were in the fertile Nile Valley were in pretty much jungle conditions, and then if you look at modern Egypt, it's been taken over by the sands of Africa, which is a totally different environment. So I don't know if that was the reason for the downfall of the era you were speaking of there, but it reminded me of that.
Mm. So we mentioned on a previous episode that
And
they
sorry
found.
if I can state, Jim, it's also curious because of how quickly they believe that happened. I think it's believed a 3-year period from the time that basically crops failed to when they were just like Mad Max. Basically, went from like a structure of royalty and control and a dominant civilization to like 3 years with the sun obscured, Jim, and it's just like you're eating your own leg. It's like pretty. We're in a temperamental world. It's good to never forget
Well, give it a few more years of lockdown, we should be seeing that again.
that. Exactly.
Yeah.
I looked over at my leg and wonder if we have ketchup.
So our last article here on our 20th episode of Cruise, 21 if you include our CR special. We're
Our
still
special.
getting nice views on that Argus
Are
Lane
we?
Maxwell special. That's good. Yeah, it's still
That's a
going.
nice
It's
episode.
still doing the rounds. It's
Hmm.
still doing the rounds. I'm proud of that episode, what we put together. So we mentioned before that they'd found a 17th century shipwreck of the century. They'd
Oh
found, and
yes, yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
mentioned it
That
on the
was
podcast
wild,
before.
wasn't it?
Just
Oh,
want to just want to give you a quick update on that. This is
wow. That
on
was so.
Thursday, the August the 6th.
Yeah.
Archaeologists have now been able to take a peek into life almost 400 years ago after a treasure hunter fulfilled his
Galleon.
lifelong goal of uncovering the remains of a 17th century vessel dubbed the shipwreck of the century. This is again Mr. Callum Hoare. It's our third article, but I haven't planned today, but perhaps we should get him on as a guest.
Yeah, he'd love
Give
it,
us
I'm
more
sure.
information. Yeah. So the history special. The heavily armed galleon Nostra Senora de Atacha. You read it for yourself. You know what
Yeah,
I'm like with names.
on its way to
Served as
Spain.
the rear guard of the 20-strong Spanish fleet that left Havana, Cuba, in early September 1622, destined for Spain. In addition to 265 people, the ship was carrying as much as 40 tons of silver, gold, and around 70 pounds of Colombian emeralds, some of the finest and most expensive in the world. After a hurricane struck on September the 5th, 1622, 8 ships sank, including the Atocha, littering the ocean floor from the Marquesas Keys to the Dry Tortugas between 30 and 70 miles west of Key West, Florida. Anyway, as you can imagine, that's worth a few quid. And the update on that is they estimate it to be 300 million quid's worth. So I'd like to get a round of applause to whoever found that. You're set for life, mate. Congratulations. I'm
You're
happy.
almost as rich as Bezos.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. So yeah, that's nice.
One of the craziest things I read about that area recently, Jim, you might want to, if you're ever allowed to travel again and get to Florida and, check out Epcot and Disney World or whatever the hell else you want to do when you're there. A woman got hit by a damn stingray when she was in a boat, Jim. I believe her dad was on board. I think he was actually driving the boat, if I can remember the story correctly. But just the madness of the world, Jim. She was like on a cruise, cooking along at 30 miles an hour on a speedboat, and a stingray leapt out of the sea, Jim Grant, and caught her in the head and killed her stark dead immediately. Just like, sure. Well, you still should actually. There's a moment of where you wouldn't have known she was about to die. It's just, if you want to have a laugh along those lines, one of the funniest things that's ever happened on the planet involving humans is when the fashion star and model Fabio got hit by, hard to interpret the incident, a goose, and not just hit a goose, but killed a goose with his face on a inaugural ride of a roller coaster. Again, once you're finished all the beer commercials on your YouTube search Fabio kills goose with face. And then, pour yourself a glass of whatever you like and just giggle the fuck out of yourself until you pass out.
Yeah, well, I feel bad about it. I thought it was going to be like a funny story when you said that she
I had to
stung the head.
throw the Fabio thing. No, of course, I wasn't. It was a dark story, but it just it still is in my mind because I basically, in the most obtuse of ways, like to plant a seed for people that when you're on your holiday and you're just fucking cruising along in the ocean, don't for a moment think you're not about to die. Because it's the ocean. So, whether you should be wearing a helmet or goggles or duck or whatever you're I don't think there was any chance she had. But this is the precariousness of the world that we live in. Whether it's volcanoes taking out the Egyptians or stingrays smacking tourists in the head, your time on this planet is pretty damn short and pretty fraught. So enjoy it now, baby.
So before we wrap up our last section of the show, we always like to do the shouts and comments that we've had on our last video here. So thank you for everyone that commented. It's all positive.
Good.
I'll read them out one by one. This is from Chris in the States. Jim's candid insights about English being more mass controlled than most places is surprising a bit to me. What's your thoughts on that, Craig? Because I'm probably biased. So you've got you're probably more well travelled than me.
I think you're probably more insightful than maybe Christopher or I could hope to be, just because of your experience with it. We're outside. We're outsiders looking in, so I fully trust your judgment on that. And
I wanted your judgment on it because it's just my opinion. Would you say the English seem to be? I was going mainly on the articles on the show I was reading out maybe 10 episodes ago where the world was protesting the lockdown, except in England where they were saying no, the lockdown isn't hard enough and we need it longer. So that was what I was going by, based on those things.
Absolutely. I was going to say that I think that they're a sleeping giant, and I think that it's a very dangerous and temperamental thing when they awaken. But I feel like the Kraken is awakening. The great English Kraken is emerging from its slumber, and not a moment too soon, because as the British are known to arrive in the nick of time, I hope the consciousness of the people to realize that if they let these tyrants get away with their nonsense and their bullshit and they don't push back against it, that it is going to be a tyranny that they will have no chance of fighting in the future. I hope that what you're saying is only correct up to the currency of the moment now, Jim, and that things are changing.
Yeah, I totally understand why Chris made that comment. The English weren't always the way that I see them now, but that was just purely my opinion,
Yeah,
and
I can see
I
why you would
value
say that.
Chris's insights there for sure.
Yeah.
And another comment Chris has made is, Craig's totally correct. The overhead has gone up so much that less than corporate businesses cannot possibly survive.
That's awesome, because I've heard a little bit more even about that over the last couple of days, Jim, and I believe that even more deeply than I did when I said it last week. Just because it's there's no middle money. It's being lower and middle income businesses are being eviscerated and destroyed, and that is going to have a knock-on effect into investment capital in every other sector and venture that you can possibly bring your imagination to create. So I'm more and more believing in that statement, and more fearful of the repercussions of it. If you've only got people like Bezos and and Musk, and if you've only got big money on the table, you're not hearing the voice of the oppressed and the little people. As I think, as we mentioned, what are we? The riffraff, the great unwashed, the voices of the little people. So yeah, I believe that even more deeply today.
And another comment here. Yes, and this alludes to what you just said. Yes, and alas, the total elimination of the great unwashed, as Craig mentioned, and which I am a proud member of, is one of the goals of this entire scam.
We're with you. We're right there. We're right there.
And another one from Chris: collectivism versus individualism. Social shamers are the former, also tend to operate on 90+% emotion, versus cogent sentience from the latter. You see, listen to the intellect of that statement. You don't get those sort of comments from people on X Factor. I like our cruise listeners. Our cruise listeners.
I sure do too. I do too. Yeah. It's nice to hear from him, and thanks for watching, sir.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So, and I agree, it really is. It boils down. I've said this for years. It boils down to collectivism versus individualism, the empowerment of the state versus the empowerment of the individual. You're absolutely bang on the money, Christopher. You can see that bang out in numerous arenas, from internet censorship, all the way through
personal rights and freedoms,
gun
your
rights,
ability to express them. Absolutely,
and the entire spectrum between. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. We're in a war, Jim. It's an ongoing war, and it's just getting hotter.
Yep. And speaking of getting hotter, it's a cheap joke from me here for another comment from Gary. He's written about our last episode. Beavers last week. Glory holes this. Is it just sex? And the answer is, when we put sex in the title, Gary, or I put one of my burlesque friends bending over in a little leather skirt on one of the thumbnails, or anything like that. When sex is mentioned or presented, we usually get double the amount of views. So it's just cheap marketing. It's just cheap marketing. Yeah, our only podcast to go over 2,000 hits was the sperm smoothie one, I believe. So anything that is a little bit, the old marketing technique, sex sells, does seem to be transforming. Yeah, it seems to be working on social media as well. Sex sells and sex gets views, at least for our podcast when it's in the title. So yes, guilty as charged. But not only that, but
nice one, Gary.
As much as I like to take into account the ancient Egypt and the stars from ancient galaxies, and looking at the historical money flow of corrupt governments, I do also like a really cheap knob gag.
We got him!
Yeah, I do like one. I do have
Uh,
the sense of humour of an 8-year-old boy
Perfect.
at times. So yes, but
Young at heart.
but
Woo!
it's obviously meant with
Young
it's
at heart.
obviously meant with love because Gary's
Sure.
one of our regular listeners that always puts in positive things. He's put a smiley face and a thumbs up. So
Yeah.
this
Cool.
is my smiley face and thumbs up to Gary and Chris and to
And
everyone
Chris,
else for watching and listening and
uh,
taking the time to comment on
thank
us
you
and
again,
taking the time to
Martina,
listen.
for sharing us.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
Martina for sharing it. A big thank you. It means a great deal to myself and Craig to know that people with brains like what we do. Yeah.
Presumably.
Yeah, no, there's no way that collectivism versus individualism, social claims one also tend to operate 90% plus on emotion versus quotient sentience from the latter. That ain't a
It's
dumb
pretty
man right there.
introspective.
That ain't
I
a dumb
get it.
man
I
right
get
there.
it.
So,
Well assessed, Jim Grant. Yeah, but if you're a drooling vegetable, we also appreciate the likes. So I'm not going to be too. I'm not going to be too fussy. If you're licking a window right now while you're watching this episode, you're good with us too. We're all on board this freak train. Get on.
I couldn't think of a better way to bring our 20th podcast to a close than those last statements, Mr. Campbell. Any other
Uh,
closing comments for today's
No,
show?
just that they said we couldn't do it, Jim Grant. It's the 20th episode of the cruise, and we look forward to going forward and hope to see you as soon as possible next week.
I always said we could do it. I just didn't think anyone would listen. But I
Uh,
was wrong, as Gary and Christopher and Martina and their lovely comments have proved. So thank you so much. And we'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.